Déjame entrar, recompensaré, promesa cambiaría todo. The smell of warm bread often filled the narrow streets, and neighbors would stop by not just for the food, but also to talk to her. Maria had a calm presence that made people feel safe. She had a younger brother, Louis, who depended on her. Their parents had passed away several years ago, leaving Maria as the one responsible for both their home and livelihood. Life had taught her to be careful, but it had also taught her the value of kindness. She believed in helping others when she could, but she had learned to protect herself as well. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a soft orange, Maria was finishing cleaning the bakery. The day had been quiet, quieter than usual. Only a few customers had come by, and she had spent most of her time organizing the shelves and sweeping the floors. Outside, the air smelled of rain. Dark clouds were rolling in quickly, and a sudden drizzle began to fall. Maria looked out the window and frowned. She didn't like storms. They always made her feel uneasy, though she had learned to manage her fears over the years. Just as she was about to lock the front door, she noticed someone standing in the alley. The figure was drenched from the rain, clothes clinging to his body, hair plastered to his forehead. He seemed exhausted, shivering from the cold. Maria instinctively felt a pang of concern. Who could this be? She wondered, tightening her grip on the keys. The stranger raised his hand and spoke softly, almost desperately. Déjame entrar, recompensaré. Maria froze for a moment. Her heart raced. She didn't know this man, and the neighborhood had its share of people with bad intentions. Her mind immediately jumped to warnings she had heard over the years. Don't open your door to strangers, never trust someone you don't know. But there was something in his voice, a mix of urgency and honesty that made her pause. His eyes were wide, and despite being soaked, there was no aggression in his posture. He looked more like someone who truly needed help than someone who wanted to harm her. She took a deep breath and said cautiously, You can come in, but only for a moment." He nodded gratefully, relief washing over his face. As he stepped inside, the warmth of the bakery hit him. Steam rose from the ovens, mixing with the scent of fresh bread and sugar. Maria wrapped a towel around his shoulders and gestured for him to sit on a chair by the counter. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice shaky. I didn't know where else to go." Maria studied him carefully. He looked ordinary enough, not someone who seemed dangerous. Still, she felt a ripple of unease. Louis, her younger brother, appeared from the back room, curious about the voice he had heard. "Who is it, Maria?" he asked, his eyes wide. "This man, he needs shelter for a while," Maria replied, trying to sound calm, though she felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Louis frowned. He was protective of his sister, and he had always warned her to be cautious. "We don't even know him. What if he's lying?" Maria knelt to meet her brother's eyes. "I know, but he looks like he really needs help, and maybe we should trust him a little. Sometimes helping someone is the right thing to do, even if it feels risky." Louis hesitated, but he nodded reluctantly. Maria returned to the stranger, offering him a cup of warm tea. He accepted it with a grateful smile, and for a few moments the three of them were quiet, listening to the rain patter against the windows. As the evening continued, Maria began to talk gently to him. "You don't have to explain everything right now," she said. "Just tell me your name." "Alejandro," he replied. "My name is Alejandro. I just need a place to rest for the night. I promise I won't cause any trouble." Maria felt a flicker of hope. She had always believed that kindness could change lives, and now she faced a moment where that belief would be tested. She offered him a small corner of the bakery where he could dry off and rest. He carefully took off his wet shoes and placed them on a mat, bowing his head slightly in thanks. Maria noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. He wasn't someone who had wandered the streets for fun. He was clearly in need. They talked for a while, keeping the conversation light. Maria asked about his journey, why he had been out in the rain, and Alejandro shared bits of his story without going into too much detail. He spoke about traveling from a distant town, trying to find work, and struggling with misfortune that seemed to follow him at every step. Maria listened intently, her heart softening with each word. She realized that sometimes life could be unfair, and some people simply found themselves in situations beyond their control. As the night grew darker, the rain outside intensified. The storm's rhythm matched the nervous tension Maria felt. Her small bakery, usually so comforting and safe, now felt like a fragile haven against the world outside. She wondered if she had done the right thing by letting Alejandro in. But when she looked at him, peaceful now as he sipped his tea, she felt a quiet reassurance. Sometimes taking a chance on kindness was worth the fear. Hours passed and the storm continued to rage. Maria stayed awake for a while, watching Alejandro sleep in the corner, wondering about the twists of fate that had brought him to her door. She thought about her parents, about the lessons they had taught her, and about the responsibility she carried for Louis. She realized that life often demanded choices that were not easy, but in the moments when courage and compassion met, something meaningful could happen. By the time the rain began to lessen, Maria had made a decision. She would let Alejandro stay, at least for a few days, while she assessed the situation. She didn't fully understand what the future held, but she felt that a single act of kindness could ripple into something larger than herself. In that quiet, warm bakery, she felt a small spark of hope, as if the universe had opened a door for reasons she could not yet see. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the streets glistening with puddles and fresh, clean air. Alejandro was awake early, helping Maria organize the bakery. He moved carefully, showing respect for her space and her work. Maria watched him with cautious optimism. Perhaps this encounter was the start of something unexpected, something that could change her life in ways she had never imagined. Though she didn't know it yet, the decision to let a stranger into her home, to take a risk and show trust, would soon become a turning point. The promise he had made that night, tea, hung in her mind. She didn't know how or when, but somehow she felt that this promise was more than words. It carried a weight that would unfold in the days to come, shaping not only Alejandro's path but also her own. And so, in that small bakery on that rainy evening, a quiet story of trust, courage, and unforeseen consequences began. A story where a single decision, born out of empathy and hope, would set the stage for life-altering events. Maria could not have imagined that the stranger she had welcomed with caution and kindness would one day become someone who would change everything she knew about trust, friendship, and the power of a simple promise. Days passed since Alejandro first appeared at Maria's bakery. The rain had long gone, but the memory of that evening lingered in Maria's mind. She found herself thinking about the stranger who had come seeking shelter. His presence in her small home was both comforting and unsettling. On one hand, he was polite, helpful, and seemed genuinely grateful. On the other hand, Maria could not ignore the caution that had been ingrained in her since childhood. Never trust someone you don't know completely. She had always been careful with strangers, always mindful of the dangers that could lurk behind kind words. Alejandro had settled into a quiet routine. He helped Maria with small tasks in the bakery, sweeping the floor, arranging pastries on the shelves, and even serving customers when Maria was busy with the oven. Customers noticed the new face, and many asked about him. Maria would simply smile and say, "He's a friend." Louis, her younger brother, was more skeptical. Every time he saw Alejandro working, he would frown slightly and mutter, "I still don't trust him completely." Maria understood his concerns. She herself felt a mixture of trust and doubt. Every time she looked at Alejandro, she wondered, could this man really be honest, or was she inviting trouble into their lives? One afternoon, as Maria prepared bread dough for the day, Alejandro spoke. "Maria, I don't want to impose," he said carefully, "but I'd like to help more than just with the bakery. I want to make things easier for you and Louis. I know it's sudden, but I want to show that my promise isn't empty." Maria paused, wiping her hands on her apron. His words sounded sincere, yet she hesitated. Promises were easy to make, but hard to keep. She studied his face, noticing the determination in his eyes. "We'll see," she said slowly. "Actions speak louder than words." Alejandro nodded, accepting her response without argument. Over the next few days, Alejandro worked quietly and efficiently. He fixed broken shelves, cleaned the storage room, and even suggested ideas to attract more customers. He was careful never to overstep, never to appear demanding or entitled. Maria began to notice the subtle changes. The bakery seemed brighter, more organized, and even the customers appeared happier. There was a calm energy about Alejandro that seemed to influence the space around him. Slowly, Maria's initial unease began to soften. She could not deny that his presence had a positive effect. However, life was not without challenges. Some neighbors had begun to notice Alejandro's frequent presence. Whispers spread quickly in the small community. "Who is this man? Why is he staying here?" people would ask. "Can he be trusted?" Rumors reached Maria's ears, and she felt a familiar tension rising. She had always valued the respect of her neighbors, and she worried about what they thought. Louis, too, grew anxious. "Maria, maybe we should ask him to leave," he said one evening, concern evident in his voice. "We don't know him. People are talking. What if we're making a mistake?" Maria took a deep breath. She understood her brother's fear, and part of her agreed. Trusting Alejandro was a risk, but she also remembered the desperation in his eyes that first rainy evening. She thought about the warmth in his voice and the honesty she had sensed in his words. She realized that caution did not have to mean rejection. Sometimes helping someone meant accepting a small amount of uncertainty. "Louis," she said gently, "I know it's scary, but we can't judge him only by what others say. We have to see for ourselves what kind of person he is." Louis frowned but remained silent, sensing that his sister had made up her mind. Maria and Alejandro began to talk more during those days. She learned bits of his past, stories of a life that had once been full of promise but had been shaken by misfortune. Alejandro spoke of a small town where he had grown up, a family he had lost, and opportunities that had disappeared before he could grasp them. His voice carried no bitterness, only a quiet reflection. He explained that he had learned the value of humility and patience, and that he believed in helping others whenever possible, even if he was struggling himself. Maria listened closely, touched by his honesty. Despite the growing trust between them, there were moments of tension. One afternoon, a mistake in the bakery caused some bread to burn. Maria, frustrated from a long day, snapped at Alejandro. "Why didn't you notice this sooner?" she asked sharply. Alejandro immediately apologized, not defensively, but with genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Maria. I'll fix it right away," he said calmly. He cleaned up the mess, kneaded a new batch of dough, and worked silently until everything was back in order. Maria watched him and felt a mix of guilt and admiration. He had not argued or complained, and his actions had shown responsibility beyond his words. Gradually, the routine and shared responsibilities began to build a subtle bond between Maria and Alejandro. They laughed together over small mistakes, celebrated when the bakery had a busy day, and supported each other when challenges arose. Louis began to notice the changes too. While he remained cautious, he could see that Alejandro genuinely cared for them and for the bakery. One day, Alejandro said, "Maria, there's something I need to tell you. I want to be honest with you about my situation. I don't have much left in the world, but I do have experience and a willingness to work hard. I want to help you succeed, not because I expect anything, but because I believe it's right." Maria felt a warmth in her chest. His words were sincere, and she realized that this was the turning point of trust. Alejandro's presence was no longer just about gratitude for a warm place to stay. It was about genuine commitment. She began to see that helping him had not only changed his path, but it was also shaping hers in unexpected ways. Yet even with this growing trust, challenges remained. Some days the bakery had few customers, and the bills seemed overwhelming. Maria wondered if her decision to trust Alejandro had been wise. She worried about the financial strain and the whispers in the neighborhood. But Alejandro never complained. He continued to work quietly, offering suggestions and ideas to make things better, always respecting her decisions. One afternoon, after a particularly slow day, Maria and Alejandro sat outside the bakery, watching the sun dip low in the sky. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh bread and distant flowers. Alejandro broke the silence. "Maria, I know I cannot erase the past or the mistakes life has made me face, but I promise you, I will do everything I can to support you. Not because I owe you, but because I want to. That promise, what I said that night, it means something to me. I will honor it." Maria looked at him, the fading sunlight reflecting in his eyes. She felt a deep sense of understanding. Trust, she realized, was not about certainty or guarantees. It was about observing actions, intentions, and consistency over time. Alejandro had shown her both. His promise was not an empty statement. It was a commitment to act, to contribute, and to be present. Over the next few weeks, Maria noticed subtle improvements in both her bakery and her life. Alejandro's efforts began to pay off. More customers came, intrigued by the energy and care in the little shop. Word spread about the bakery's welcoming atmosphere and delicious products. People began to see Alejandro not as a stranger, but as part of the daily life that brought warmth to the community. Maria felt a sense of relief and quiet pride. The decision to trust someone had not been easy, but it was beginning to bear fruit. One evening, as Maria closed the bakery and prepared for bed, she thought about the journey so far. The initial fear, the hesitation, the small steps of trust, and the subtle changes in their daily lives, all of it had brought her to a place of cautious hope. She realized that life often demanded choices that were uncomfortable, choices that required faith in others despite uncertainty. And sometimes, those choices led to unexpected blessings, transforming ordinary moments into meaningful experiences. Maria could not have predicted what the future held, but she felt a quiet confidence. She knew that the days ahead would have challenges, that trust could be tested, and that the promise Alejandro had made might bring surprises. Yet she also knew that by opening her door and heart, she had set in motion a story far greater than herself. A story about courage, compassion, and the unexpected ways human connections could shape life. And so, in the days following that rainy evening, a delicate balance of trust and caution guided Maria, Alejandro, and Louis. They navigated challenges together, learned from one another, and discovered that even in a world full of uncertainty, kindness and honesty could create hope. The promise Alejandro had made, recompensaré, was no longer just a phrase. It was becoming a quiet force, slowly changing the rhythm of their lives and preparing them for events that none of them could yet imagine. One morning, as the sun rose gently over the quiet streets, Maria noticed that Alejandro was unusually thoughtful. He moved about the bakery with his usual care, but his eyes seemed distant, as if memories were tugging at him. Maria poured herself a cup of tea and watched him knead dough with steady hands, wondering what was on his mind. For days he had been fully present, helping the bakery grow and keeping the atmosphere light, but now there was something more behind his calm demeanor. She felt curious, but also hesitant to ask, not wanting to pry. Finally, as the morning rush began to settle, Alejandro looked up at Maria with a seriousness she had rarely seen in him. "Maria," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "there's something I need to share with you. I've kept parts of my past hidden because I wasn't sure how people would react, but I think you should know, especially after everything you've done for me." Maria paused, wiping her hands on her apron. She gestured for him to continue. Alejandro took a deep breath and began to speak, recounting a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary in its challenges. He spoke of a time when he had been successful, running a small but promising business in a nearby town. His family had been close and he had dreams for the future, but life had its own plans. A sudden financial crisis had left him with nothing. He lost his home, his savings, and the trust he had in the stability of life. It was a difficult period, filled with struggle and uncertainty, but Alejandro had survived through sheer resilience. Maria listened intently, her heart tightening at certain moments. She could see the pain he had endured, but also the strength that had brought him through those dark times. She had always believed that people were shaped by both hardship and kindness, and now she had tangible proof before her eyes. Alejandro continued, speaking not with bitterness but with reflection. He told her about the lessons he had learned, the value of humility, and the importance of helping others when possible, no matter how small the gesture might be. "I've always promised myself," Alejandro said softly, "that if I ever had the chance even a little to repay someone's kindness, I would do it. That night when I came to your bakery, I wasn't just asking for shelter. I was asking for hope, a chance to start again. And your willingness to let me in, it changed something inside me. I want you to understand that my promise, recompensaré, is not empty. It means I will do my best to honor the trust you gave me." Maria felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She had known there was honesty in Alejandro, but hearing his story in detail gave it weight. It was one thing to see someone work hard and be respectful, but it was another to hear the struggles they had overcome and the values they carried with them. She realized that trust was not only built through actions, but also through understanding the path someone had walked. Louis, who had been quietly observing from the corner, finally spoke. "So, he really isn't dangerous?" he asked, a hint of relief in his voice. Alejandro smiled gently. "No, Louis, I'm here to help, not to harm. I want to show you both that trust can be returned with kindness." Louis nodded, still a little cautious, but a sense of acceptance began to grow in him as well. As the days turned into weeks, Alejandro's story continued to unfold naturally in small pieces. He shared memories of his family, of the friends who had supported him, and of the lessons learned from mistakes and losses. Each story revealed not just hardship, but resilience and character. Maria began to understand that this was more than a man simply seeking shelter. Alejandro had been shaped by life in ways that allowed him to empathize deeply, to act with thoughtfulness and care, and to value every opportunity to do good. The revelation of his past marked a turning point in their relationship. Maria's initial caution transformed into genuine trust. She no longer wondered whether she had made a mistake in letting him in. Instead, she began to see Alejandro as a partner in their daily lives, someone whose presence enriched the bakery and their home. Even the neighbors who had whispered began to notice the change. Alejandro's respectful demeanor and consistent effort began to quiet doubts and reshape perceptions. One afternoon, while the bakery was quiet, Alejandro shared another piece of his journey. He spoke of the loneliness that had followed him after losing his business. He described nights when he had no place to stay, days when he had little to eat, and moments when he questioned whether life would ever improve. Yet through all of it, he maintained a belief in helping others, in small acts of generosity and compassion. "Even when I had nothing," he said, "I tried to be kind because I believed that one day someone would give me a chance too." Maria felt a strong connection to his words. She realized that life often required courage not just to survive, but to trust and to hope. Alejandro's experiences mirrored a universal truth. Everyone faces challenges, and everyone has moments when the kindness of others can be life-changing. By letting him in, she had not only offered shelter but had also witnessed the transformation of a person willing to honor his word. Yet, it was not just Alejandro who was changing. Maria herself felt a shift within. She had always been careful, perhaps overly so, and her life had been structured around control and caution. Alejandro's presence taught her patience and openness, the value of observing actions over judging appearances, and the courage to allow someone else into her life. She began to see that kindness, when paired with discernment, could create a ripple effect of positive change. As weeks turned into months, Alejandro became more than a helper in the bakery. He became a friend, a confidant, and a source of inspiration. His past, once a heavy burden, now served as a guide for his present actions. Every gesture, every suggestion, every quiet moment of assistance was a reflection of the lessons he had learned and the promise he intended to keep. One evening, after a long day of baking and serving customers, Maria and Alejandro sat together outside the bakery, watching the sunset. The streets glistened with the last remnants of a gentle rain, and the air was cool and refreshing. Alejandro spoke softly. "Maria, I've come to understand that life is about more than survival. It's about connection, trust, and the impact we have on others. Your decision to help me, to let me in when I needed it most, gave me a chance to prove that promises matter. I will always remember that." Maria smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had seen trust grow from a simple act of kindness into a meaningful bond. She realized that people were often more complex than they appeared, and that understanding someone's journey could transform fear into empathy. Alejandro's story was not just about hardship. It was about resilience, integrity, and the power of human connection. Louis, who had been listening quietly, spoke again. "I think I understand now. You really do care about us, don't you?" Alejandro nodded, his expression gentle. "Yes, Louis, I do, and I will continue to show it through my actions." The bakery, once a place of simple routines, had become a space where trust, compassion, and mutual support thrived. Customers noticed the change too. They felt the warmth, the careful attention, and the respect that Alejandro brought to his work. Slowly, the community began to embrace him as part of their lives, not as a stranger, but as someone who had overcome hardship and was now choosing to do good. This turning point marked a new chapter for everyone involved. Maria's initial act of kindness had set off a chain of events that reshaped her understanding of trust. Alejandro's promise was no longer an abstract idea. It was alive in every action he took, in every effort he made to help the bakery and her family. Louis began to see that trust, while sometimes risky, could also be rewarding. By the time the first blossoms of spring appeared in the streets, Maria, Alejandro, and Louis had formed a quiet, resilient family of sorts. The bakery thrived, their relationships deepened, and the lessons of patience, empathy, and perseverance became woven into the fabric of their daily lives. Alejandro's past, once filled with uncertainty and struggle, had become a source of strength, guiding him to honor the promise he had made and to continue building a life of integrity. And so, the revelation of Alejandro's story became more than just a sharing of the past. It was a turning point that strengthened trust, built connections, and laid the foundation for future challenges. Maria understood that life's greatest lessons often arrived in unexpected ways, and that the courage to trust could transform not only one life, but many. The promise that had begun with a simple plea, "Déjame entrar, recompensaré," was evolving into a lived reality, shaping the future in ways none of them could yet fully imagine. Life in Maria's bakery had grown comfortable and steady, but comfort often comes with new challenges. The initial joy of Alejandro's presence and the small successes of the bakery began to attract attention, not all of it welcome. Some neighbors, who had been suspicious from the beginning, started to voice their concerns more openly. Whispers turned into questions, questions turned into gossip, and gossip reached Maria's ears. People asked why she had let a stranger stay in her home and why she seemed so trusting. Some hinted that Alejandro could be hiding something, though no one could say what. Maria tried to ignore it, focusing on the bakery and her family, but the words stung. Even the smallest hints of distrust in a tight-knit neighborhood could affect how people viewed you, and Maria felt the weight of judgment pressing on her. Louis, who had been gradually warming up to Alejandro, became anxious once again. "Maria, maybe they're right," he said one evening as they closed the shop. "What if he isn't who he says he is? People are talking and I don't want anyone to hurt us." Maria took a deep breath, placing a hand on her brother's shoulder. "I know it's difficult, Louis. I understand your fears, but Alejandro has proven himself. He works hard, he respects us, and he keeps his word. That's more than most people can say. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easiest one, and trusting someone requires courage." Louis looked at her, still uncertain, but he sensed the confidence in her voice and chose to trust her judgment. Even as the social pressure mounted, the bakery itself faced practical challenges. Business had been steady, but it was never easy. Ingredients were costly, the ovens required careful maintenance, and customers' demands could be unpredictable. On particularly busy days, Maria would feel exhausted, her arms aching from kneading dough, and her mind restless from managing both work and the household. Alejandro noticed her fatigue and quietly offered assistance, though he always made sure not to overstep. He cleaned the counters, restocked shelves, and even greeted customers with a warm smile that brought many back again. Despite Alejandro's helpfulness, there were moments of tension. One afternoon, a large delivery of flour arrived, but it was heavier than expected. Alejandro suggested reorganizing the storage to prevent accidents, but some of the heavier sacks slipped, spilling across the floor. Maria, already stressed from a long day, raised her voice in frustration. "Be careful," she exclaimed. Alejandro immediately apologized, bending down to clean up the mess without complaint. He worked silently and efficiently, showing both humility and responsibility. This incident reminded Maria that challenges would always appear, but how they were handled mattered more than the mistakes themselves. One evening, as they were locking up, a neighbor came by, speaking loudly enough for others nearby to hear. "Maria, are you sure you can trust that man? People like him sometimes take advantage of good hearts," the woman said, her voice full of suspicion. Alejandro remained calm, polite, and quiet, simply nodding and thanking her for her concern. Maria, however, felt a surge of defensiveness. She had seen Alejandro's character firsthand, and the gossip hurt not because it was true, but because it questioned her judgment and values. She realized that trusting someone often meant standing firm against doubt from the outside world. Financial pressures added to the strain. Although Alejandro had helped improve the bakery's operations, the cost of ingredients and utilities often exceeded the money coming in. Some days the shop barely broke even. Maria worried about the future. She wondered if her decision to trust Alejandro had been wise, even though her heart told her otherwise. Alejandro, noticing her concern, spoke gently one evening. "Maria, I know it's difficult, but I believe we can get through this together. We just need to be patient, work carefully, and make small improvements every day. I'm here to help in any way I can." His calm determination reminded her that she was not alone. In the following weeks, Alejandro took initiative to help beyond the usual chores. He suggested small changes in the bakery's layout, introduced ideas to make the products more appealing, and even started small community events to attract more customers. For instance, he organized a weekend bread tasting event, where neighbors could sample pastries and breads, chat, and learn about the baking process. The event was a modest success, drawing more attention to the bakery and gradually changing some skeptical neighbors' opinions. Maria realized that Alejandro's efforts were not about grand gestures, but about consistent, thoughtful action that demonstrated trustworthiness. However, not all challenges could be solved through work. One rainy afternoon, a pipe in the bakery's storage room burst, flooding part of the space and ruining a batch of supplies. The damage was stressful, and Maria felt overwhelmed. Alejandro immediately rolled up his sleeves, helping to move the wet sacks, clean the floor, and assess what could be salvaged. "It's going to be okay," he said calmly, even though he too understood the seriousness of the problem. "We'll repair the damage, replace what we need, and keep going. This is just a temporary setback." His composure gave Maria strength. She realized that resilience was not about avoiding problems, but about facing them with patience and determination. Meanwhile, Louis began to see the value of Alejandro's presence in their lives. He watched as Alejandro solved problems calmly, treated Maria with respect, and continued to honor his promise. Slowly, Louis's skepticism turned into quiet trust. He began helping more willingly, learning from Alejandro's example. Even the minor challenges, like cleaning after busy days or organizing deliveries, became lessons in teamwork and mutual support. The turning point in this difficult period came when Alejandro suggested reaching out to the community for help. He proposed hosting a small charity event at the bakery, where a portion of sales would go to a local children's center. Maria hesitated at first, worried about potential costs, but Alejandro's gentle persuasion convinced her. They worked together, promoting the event and preparing special treats. The day arrived and the bakery was filled with neighbors, friends, and children. The event was a heartwarming success, bringing both community support and increased business. It reminded Maria that facing challenges with openness, creativity, and teamwork could lead to unexpected rewards. Through these struggles, Alejandro continued to honor his promise in subtle but meaningful ways. He did not flaunt his assistance, nor did he expect recognition. He simply acted with consistency, patience, and care. Maria realized that true change did not always come in dramatic moments. It often arrived quietly, through persistent effort and unwavering integrity. By the time the first signs of summer appeared, the bakery had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. Maria, Alejandro, and Louis had grown stronger as a unit, not because life had become easier, but because they had faced adversity together. The challenges, gossip, financial strain, minor accidents, and community pressure had tested their trust, patience, and resilience. But through each obstacle, they discovered that courage, honesty, and consistent action could overcome fear and uncertainty. Maria reflected on the journey so far. She had taken a risk in letting Alejandro into her home and life. The road had not been smooth, but it had been worthwhile. She saw that challenges were not obstacles meant to stop her, but opportunities to grow, to test her values, and to witness the strength of human character. Alejandro's promise, recompensaré, was no longer just words. It was alive in his actions, guiding him to help, support, and uplift in ways that quietly transformed their lives. Even Louis, once hesitant and fearful, had begun to embrace the lessons of trust and collaboration. He realized that people could surprise you in positive ways, and that judging someone solely by appearances or rumors could prevent meaningful connections. The bakery, once just a small shop for bread and pastries, had become a place of learning, growth, and hope. And so, through rain, accidents, gossip, and financial pressure, the trio discovered that life's greatest lessons often arrived disguised as challenges. Each obstacle required patience, effort, and faith in one another. Maria understood that trust, once earned, could withstand doubt. Alejandro demonstrated that promises, when coupled with integrity and consistent action, could change lives quietly but profoundly. Louis learned that fear could be balanced with observation and discernment, and that courage often meant opening oneself to the possibilities of trust. By the end of this period of struggle, they had learned that life would always have obstacles, but facing them together with honesty, care, and resilience made the journey meaningful. The bakery continued to thrive. The community slowly began to accept Alejandro as a trustworthy presence, and the bond between Maria, Louis, and Alejandro had deepened in ways that could not be undone. Challenges would come again, but they had proven that with courage, patience, and steadfast commitment, even the most daunting difficulties could be overcome. And so, the story of trust, perseverance, and quiet transformation continued. The promise Alejandro had made years ago, to repay kindness, to honor trust, was being fulfilled in everyday actions, creating ripples of change that extended far beyond the walls of the bakery. Every spilled sack, every whispered word, every challenge faced together strengthened the bond between them, showing that true reward often comes not from grand gestures, but from the steady, unwavering effort to do good, even in the face of adversity. Months had passed since Alejandro first appeared at Maria's bakery, and the little shop had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The shelves were neatly arranged, the ovens ran efficiently, and the aroma of fresh bread and pastries filled the air every morning. The bakery had become a hub of warmth and friendliness, a place where neighbors gathered not just to buy food, but to share stories, laughter, and a sense of community. Alejandro's presence was no longer a source of doubt or gossip. Instead, people began to see him as someone who had faced hardship and had chosen to act with kindness and integrity. Maria looked around one busy afternoon, feeling a quiet pride. Customers were chatting happily, Louis was helping serve pastries with a small smile, and Alejandro moved carefully among them, greeting each person with respect and attention. It was a scene of simple harmony, yet Maria knew it had not been easy to reach this point. They had faced gossip, financial stress, and unexpected mishaps, and through it all, trust had been tested and strengthened. The lessons of patience, resilience, and compassion were evident in every corner of the bakery. Alejandro had kept his promise in ways that were subtle but powerful. He did not provide lavish rewards or make grand gestures. Instead, he showed his gratitude through consistent action, working tirelessly, protecting the bakery, supporting Maria and Louis, and contributing to the community. His promise, recompensaré, had become a guiding principle, a quiet force that shaped his every choice. Maria understood now that true repayment of kindness was not always immediate or obvious. It was often revealed slowly, through sustained care, attention, and loyalty. One day, as the afternoon sun streamed through the bakery windows, Maria noticed a familiar customer lingering near the counter. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, a neighbor who had once been particularly skeptical of Alejandro. She looked around, taking in the lively scene, and smiled. "I have to admit," she said, her tone soft, "I was wrong. This bakery feels different now. You've done something special here, Maria, and you've chosen well in trusting him." Maria felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that even the most doubtful observers could see the change Alejandro had brought about. Louis, now more confident in his trust of Alejandro, had taken on more responsibilities at the bakery. He helped with deliveries, prepared small orders, and even assisted Alejandro in organizing community events. The trio worked together seamlessly, each person contributing in their own way. Louis had learned valuable lessons about patience, observation, and trust. He realized that fear could be balanced with careful judgment, and that taking a chance on someone who had proven themselves could lead to unexpected rewards. Despite the steady rhythm of daily life, surprises continued to arrive in subtle ways. One morning, Alejandro suggested opening a small corner in the bakery dedicated to teaching children how to bake simple pastries. Maria hesitated at first, concerned about time, space, and resources, but Alejandro's enthusiasm was contagious. "It's not just about teaching," he said. "It's about creating joy, sharing skills, and showing that kindness can grow in many ways." Reluctantly, Maria agreed, and soon the bakery was filled with laughter and excitement as children learned to mix dough, shape pastries, and decorate them with care. The project was modest, but its impact was profound. Parents thanked them, neighbors visited to watch, and the sense of community deepened further. In the evenings, when the bakery closed and the streets were quiet, Maria would often sit with Alejandro and reflect on the journey they had shared. "I never imagined that letting you in would lead to all of this," she admitted one night, sipping a cup of tea. Alejandro smiled gently. "Neither did I, Maria. Life works in mysterious ways. That night, your act of kindness was a turning point, not just for me, but for all of us. Trust can create ripples far greater than we imagine." The past, with its hardships and uncertainties, had shaped Alejandro into a person capable of keeping his promise. But it was the present, with its everyday actions and choices, that demonstrated the real meaning of commitment. Every loaf of bread he baked, every customer he greeted warmly, and every moment he supported Maria and Louis reinforced the trust he had earned. Maria realized that repayment of kindness was not always about money, recognition, or grand gestures. It was about consistent, meaningful actions that created stability, joy, and hope. As the bakery thrived, the family's bond grew stronger. Alejandro was no longer a guest or a helper. He was a true member of their lives. Louis laughed more freely, helping with tasks he once found tedious, and Maria felt lighter, knowing that she had chosen wisely in trusting someone who had proven their integrity. Together, they had navigated storms, both literal and metaphorical, emerging stronger and more connected. The community also began to notice the subtle transformation. People who had once questioned Alejandro's intentions now sought his advice or assistance. Some asked for tips on baking, others for guidance in small business matters, and many simply enjoyed his calm presence. Alejandro had become a quiet force for good, not through words or promises, but through steady, trustworthy action. His influence extended beyond the bakery, touching lives in ways that Maria and Louis had not anticipated. One evening, after a long day filled with laughter and hard work, Maria reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the rainy night when Alejandro had first appeared at her door, desperate and soaked. She remembered the mixture of fear and compassion she had felt, the hesitation to let him in, and the quiet hope that guided her decision. That single choice had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not only Alejandro's life, but also her own. She realized that life's greatest lessons often arrive in unexpected ways, disguised as small decisions, acts of kindness, or quiet moments of trust. Louis, sitting nearby, spoke up. "Maria, I think I understand now. Trust isn't about being sure everything will be perfect. It's about believing in someone's actions, watching them show honesty and care, and giving them a chance." Maria smiled, proud of her brother's growth. Alejandro nodded in agreement. "Exactly, Louis. Trust is fragile, but when it is nurtured with consistency, respect, and understanding, it can create bonds that last a lifetime." The bakery, once a place of simple routines, had become a symbol of resilience, compassion, and hope. Each loaf of bread, each pastry, and each small act of kindness represented the journey they had shared. Alejandro's promise, made in desperation that first rainy night, had grown into a reality far richer than words could convey. He had not only repaid Maria's kindness, but had also shown that true reward often comes quietly, in the everyday choices that build trust, nurture relationships, and create positive change. Time passed, and the bakery continued to flourish. Alejandro's story became known in the neighborhood, not as a tale of past misfortune, but as an example of integrity, resilience, and the power of keeping promises. Maria often shared the story with customers and friends, emphasizing that sometimes a small act of kindness can change lives in ways that no one can predict. Louis, now confident and responsible, helped teach children and neighbors alike the lessons he had learned about trust, patience, and courage. One quiet evening, as the sunset painted the streets in shades of gold, Alejandro and Maria stood outside the bakery, watching the world around them. The streets were calm, the air fresh, and the scent of baked goods lingered softly. Alejandro spoke gently. "Maria, I know I promised to repay your kindness that night. I hope you see now that I have, not through riches or words, but through action, respect, and care. Your decision to trust me changed everything, not just for me, but for all of us." Maria smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I do see it, Alejandro. And more than that, I've learned that trust, courage, and kindness can create change in ways we never expect. Your promise was more than words. It was a lesson in life, and I am grateful for it every day." And so, life continued at the bakery. The trio worked together, faced small challenges with calm determination, and shared joy and laughter in abundance. Alejandro's promise had come to life, fulfilling its meaning not through instant reward, but through steady, honest effort that touched lives in ways that went beyond the walls of the bakery. Maria, Louis, and Alejandro had learned that kindness, trust, and perseverance were not just ideals. They were actions that, when lived fully, could transform ordinary days into extraordinary experiences. In the end, the promise made one rainy night, Déjame, entrar, recompensaré, had truly changed everything. It had brought hope to a weary traveler, strengthened a family, and created a ripple of goodness in the community. The bakery remained a place of warmth, trust, and resilience, reminding everyone who visited that sometimes the simplest gestures, the quietest promises, and the smallest acts of faith can change lives forever. Maria often thought back to that first night, smiling quietly. The rain had poured down, uncertainty had filled the air, and a single decision had been made. That choice had taught her the value of trust, the importance of courage, and the life-changing power of kindness. And through it all, Alejandro had shown that keeping a promise was not just about words. It was about action, integrity, and the willingness to make a difference in the lives of others. And so, the bakery continued to thrive. The bonds between them grew stronger every day, and the promise that had begun as a desperate plea had become a living testament to the power of trust, compassion, and hope.